Okay, well, welcome everybody. We've had 5 minutes for the audience to assemble around the world. This is a really marvelous occasion. My name is David McDonald, and I'm from the WildCRU, the Wildlife Conservation Research Unit in Oxford. I'm not quite sure why I qualify to be hosting you today, but it's a thrill and an honor to do so. And I have spent quite a number of decades working with both wild canids and wild felids, so perhaps that's at the sweet spot of our conversation today. Let me begin by explaining what's going to happen. In the next 4 minutes, I'm just going to outline the plan. And the first thing I must remember to say to you is that we're recording this meeting. So I hope that doesn't cause any of you awkwardness, but if you speak, your remarks will be recorded. I should also explain that this quite fantastic gathering, and we're expecting a very large number of people, this gathering is a product, as it were, from the conference on wolves across borders, where the topic of the priorities that were attached to wolves and perhaps wild canids in general versus wild felids came up as something worthy of more expert exploration. And we are so lucky today that we have the most extraordinary panel of experts to talk to you, as well as very many other experts, probably a couple of hundred of them, joining in the conversation as well. Let me explain that how it's going to work is that each of our panel members will be given 10 minutes to make some introductory remarks. And then if you have any really pressing questions based on what they've said, there'll be a brief 2-minute session where they can make a preliminary answer to your questions. Your questions would be put in the chat panel for the meeting, and it's then up to me to find those questions and relay them to the panel members. The panel members may, of course, chat amongst themselves, which would be very informative for us to listen to. And then when we've heard those 10-minute presentations from each of the panel members, by then it should be about 20 minutes past 2 in UK term, 20 minutes past the hour. We'll get all the panel members back, and you'll have the opportunity to bombard them with questions again from the chat, and they too can develop the topics that they've been talking about. The whole meeting is going to finish at 3 o'clock UK time. So we've got plenty of time for discussion. So I'm going to just tell you about the excitements that lie in store by introducing the panel members before I turn to the first of them to speak. But it is really quite remarkable when you listen to the names I'm going to give you of the panel members and see the institutions they come from. And indeed, when we think of the people around the world who are listening right now, it's one of the extraordinary factors of modern life that we can have this grouping of people in one place at one time. We're going to begin by hearing from Mohammad Farhadinia, who has a double act, being based at both the universities of Kent and of Oxford. And then we're going to hear also from Shivam Shrotriya from the Wildlife Institute of India, before we move to Mohammad Kabir from the Wildlife Ecology Lab in Pakistan, and then Geraldine Werhahn, also from the University of Oxford, from the WildCRU, before we turn to Claudio Augugliaro from the University of Lausanne in Switzerland, and then finally to Bejan Lokipanidze from the Noah's Ark Center in Georgia. So what a remarkable lineup of people. And we're now ready to start with those 10-minute presentations. I should mention as well that we have, to guarantee our success today, a secret weapon in the form of Barbara. Barbara is organizing all of the Zoom transitions, and we're just enormously grateful for her for taking on that stressful role. And now is her first test because hopefully Mohammad will appear on the screen. And soon I anticipate Mohammad's slides may also appear. So Mohammad Farhadinia, our first speaker for 10 minutes, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, David. I'm just trying to find my slide here. Share screen. Yes, okay. Can you see them?
Yes, perfect.
Good. Oops. Oh. Okay. Hi, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, everywhere you are. And thank you for joining up for this panel discussion. So the first talk is by me, and I will be discussing about different effects of land use management on wolves and Persian leopards in Iran. So this is the range of these two species, the Persian leopard, an endangered subspecies of the leopards, and gray wolves. So you can see more or less they are widespread across the whole country. But this similar distribution map is not equal in the terms they are conserved. In fact, the fines for poaching for each of them have been different. 3 to 4 times increase for the fine of poaching for the leopards for all these species actually since 2010. But in fact, for the wolves, it has been decreased by 20%, which means that the country is not really prioritizing the wolf conservation comparing to other species because the fine has decreased. So let me take you to a specific part of the country. That's northeastern Iran, the Kopetdagh mountain, and this is the bordering Turkmenistan. So it's a transboundary landscape full of mountains, and there are 3 national parks, Tandura National Park on top, and you have Saluk and Sarigol, 2 at the bottom. And we use camel traps, and we found an amazing high density of Persian leopard in those landscapes. So we can see from 4 to 8 individuals per 100 square kilometer, which is quite amazing. It's quite high. But how does that affect the wolves? So we started coloring the leopards in those areas. And then we realized that the leopards are mostly living within the national park. They occasionally wander outside of the national park, which is that red boundary. But at the same time, based on the camera trap data, we realized that the wolves are mostly outside of the national park, not within, perhaps because it's a high density of leopards within the national park, but occasionally they come into the national park as well. So we can see that the national park has created a heaven for the leopards, but not for wolves. So if we compare it against the different type of the land use management in the area, we can see that in fact, spared lands, or basically the national parks where we don't have people, they are the best areas for leopards, as you can see on the right figure. But for the wolves, they are mostly occurring in the shared landscape, the places that we have the communal pastures, we have places that we have the people are grazing their livestock. So you can see these 2 animals are responding to land use management in different ways. The spare lands are basically best for the leopards, while the shared lands are for the wolves. And again, if we look at all these maps, the red patches, they show that where are the best, that they have the highest occurrence for the leopards and the wolves. So you can see they are in the opposite direction. Where we have the red for the leopards, we have it white for the wolves. In fact, we need a combination of land sharing and land sparing model for the community of large carnivores if we want to save them, all of them together. Otherwise, perhaps land sparing would be perhaps best for the leopards, but we need to protect the entire community of the large carnivores. So how these 2 interacting species are affecting people's lives? So this is another aspect of the work. So we realized that leopards are killing on average about 1 sheep per year from each household living in those landscapes. In contrast, wolves are killing almost 5 to 6 times more than the leopards. So if you look at this map, you would say, well, the leopards are doing well. It's just 1 sheep per year. It's not really too much. So we should focus on the leopards. And because the wolves could be quite an expensive species to protect because they are killing too many. But in reality, it's not like that. We have multiple predators in this landscape. And we realize that those people who are losing animal to the wolves, they tend to dislike leopards as well. In fact, people don't care about the species, they care about the economy. If they lose animal to either the wolves or the leopard, they eventually dislike all of them. So we can't say if we have multiple species, just we can prioritize one of them and then forget about the rest of them. The rest of them are somehow affecting people's attitude towards the one that we are so keen, which in this case could be the leopard. So in conclusion, I guess there are a few take-home messages from this work. The first one, when we have a community of carnivores, people's attitudes could be affected and influenced by the interaction between those carnivores. And we should be able to protect the entire guild, not just one single species. The second one is when we have multiple land use managements, different species find the places useful, suitable for each of them in different land use managements. And in fact, we need to have a combination of land sharing and land sparing. We can't choose either of them. And eventually, if we think about human carnivore coexistence, we should avoid a preferential tendency toward one species. For example, in this one, the leopards, and then just forget about the rest, because the rest, which we just tend to forget, they are affecting how people are thinking about what we prefer, which is in this case, the leopards. So this work has been the outcome of about 10 years work in northeastern Iran, and I should thank all the people, the team members, the academic collaborators, and all the funders and donors. Thank you very much.
Mohammad, thank you. Thank you for keeping splendidly to time as well. I just need to see how the chat is going. Let me, while we're organizing ourselves, because Mohammad, probably you should stop sharing your screen now so that the speaker can prepare. That's great. You mentioned that the penalty, the fine for killing a leopard was so much higher than for killing a wolf. Yes. Do you have any insights into how many of these penalties are imposed? How frequently are fines made for wolves as opposed to killing leopards?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have any number, but I'm sure that the number of imposed fines are much lower for the wolves, because in general, wolves are seen as, vermin species. So in fact, they are, that's the reason the government has started to reduce the ban. Perhaps not to motivate the communities to kill more, but just to avoid having more confrontation with the communities which are killing more. So that shows that they shouldn't be imposed too much.
Well, I think you've introduced some very interesting vocabulary already, and it'll be fascinating to hear whether that vocabulary resonates with our other panel members, because you've said wolves are considered as vermin, and how challenging it is for us conservation biologists to find two magnificent carnivores, one considered an asset, another vermin, and these words are used lightly, but with grave consequences. Anyway, we must keep going. Mohammad, you've got us off to a marvelous start. Thank you very much. So our next speaker with a 10-minute allocation is going to be Shivam from the Wildlife Institute of India. I'm hoping that with Barbara's magic, Shivam's slides may soon appear on the screen. Marvelous. Okay, Shivam, over to you.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Greetings to everyone. And thank you, David, for the introduction. So I'm going to talk about ancient wolves of India and how, despite having the same level of legal protection for both wolves and other wildcats in India, there is still a lot of overshadow of cats on the wolves. Slides moving. Yeah. So India is quite an interesting place from the perspective of wolf conservation and any discourse on wolves. We have two different lineages of wolves in India. One is found on the northern border, Himalayan or Tibetan wolf, which is found all across Tibetan Plateau. And the second lineage is Indian wolf, which is found all across peninsular India, along with Pakistan, and some sightings have happened on the border of Bangladesh also recently, on the border of Nepal as well. So These two lineages have been brought into a spotlight in last 20 years by a lot of DNA-based studies that have figured out that these lineages may be one of the oldest and most ancient lineages of wolves. So if you just see holistic wolves of entire world, so those have diverged from other wolves and bulldog clades about 100,000 years ago, while the Himalayan wolf and the Indian wolf, they have perhaps diverged from all other wolves at around 200 to 700,000 years. So that's one interesting thing about these wolves. And the second thing is that the wolves in a trans-Himalayan region, that is Himalayan or Tibetan wolves, they have also adapted to unique conditions of that landscape to face with the hypoxia conditions and all. So I guess Geraldine is here, so she will be talking more about these wolves. And now India is a mega biodiversity country. And along with these wolves, we also have some of the magnificent cats. Tiger, certainly everyone knows the tiger is national animal of India, and we hold one of the largest population of tigers. Along with tiger, we have leopard, we have snow leopard in the mountains, or we have the only living population of Asiatic lion, some other species like clouded leopard and other species that I'm not mentioning here much about caracal and all. So yeah, lot of diversity about of cats. Now what happens is, when we have so much diversity, a lot of attention goes from conservation priority species, and then the other species like wolves, which are found everywhere, attention goes lower on those. I particularly work upon the wolves found in the Himalayas, but for the purpose of this presentation, I have pulled data and information from a lot of other studies. So I'll be giving some perspective from both sides, Himalayan as well as Indian wolves. So this one is from my own work that we modeled some distribution of wolves in trans-Himalayan landscape, because before that we had almost zero information available on the ecology and biology of Himalayan wolves. We only recently got to know that, okay, these wolves might be ancient, and then the interest started generating. So we modeled about that out of about 180,000 square kilometer that is in India. About 47,000 square kilometer is a suitable habitat for wolves. But this habitat is found mostly along the valleys and open plains, which are also the places where humans are living in these areas. If you compare that with snow leopard, that is the other cat species found in this landscape. So the suitable area for snow leopard is about 26,000 square kilometer. And if you just look at the estimates, population estimates are about in the same range of 350 to 500 animals. But the habitat preference of snow leopards are in high elevation areas, cliff areas, while wolves are in the valley habitats. So the human interaction with these species happens in a very different way. Livestock attacks are common for both the species, but it's very difficult to see snow leopards otherwise. While you can encounter wolves in these valley areas, and which are non-conflict encounters also. So it makes a perception about wolves that they are found everywhere, they are more common, and they're probably less at threat of extinction compared to snow leopard. When I did some socioeconomic survey in this landscape, so I found out that there is not much difference in the public perception about both the species. So, and it was more positive compared to a lot of other places where you will see that perception for carnivores is much more negative. However, there was more negative attitude towards wolves compared to snow leopard, which is understandable, because if you see the number of livestock consumption in snow leopard diet compared to wolf diet, so snow leopard diet is mostly consisted of Asiatic ibex and blue sheep, so that makes almost 40 to 50% of their diet, and cattle, sheep, and livestock is a lesser part of their diet, while wolves, about 50%, more than 50% of their diet is livestock in this landscape. So of course that brings them into conflict. And another thing is interesting, of course, if you follow through that diet chart, and then most of the cases are happening in field actually because of wolves. But when it comes to asking for the compensation from the government agencies on these attacks, you'll see a stark difference. Most of the cases that are registered with the department for compensation cases, those belong to snow leopards. People hardly report wolf cases. And perhaps that's because there is less awareness. Perhaps departments are not focusing on wolf attacks. So there is this policy level artifact that is affecting this perception as well. When we look at the other wolf in India, Indian wolf, which is found in the landscape where other magnificent cats like tiger and leopard are found. So if we just look at this, suitable area for tigers and leopard almost overlaps, and their population estimates are almost in the same order as the wolves. While the wolves' suitable habitat is about 89,000 square kilometers, but the wolf habitat is outside of the protected areas, mostly occurs in grassland patches. Tiger and leopard mostly occur in the forest lands. You can also see the difference in the scientific community. While a lot of funds and focus on research goes to tiger and leopard. So there is one study that has come out recently that has collated all the information. It shows that almost 300 and 200 publications have come out for tiger and leopard compared to only 57 publications in the last 70 odd years are on wolves only. If we just add one more information, one more stat to it. In India, we have about 998 protected areas. Out of those, 54 are specifically created for tigers. Those are called tiger reserves. But for wolves, we hardly have two, but rather unknown wildlife sanctuaries. So that also shows that even though both the species are listed in the same schedule in India, they are given same level of protection, but in practice, it just does not translate at the same level. There's one recent study by one of my colleagues in Pinch Tiger Reserve. So Pinch Tiger Reserve is in the heart of India. It's in a forested landscape. So of course, wolves are found in the fringes only. So if you see just the livestock depredation cases in this area, the tigers and leopards, they have killed about 42 to 35 livestock cases within 4 to 5 years. Despite that, the public perception is mostly negative for wolves, and it's not as negative for tigers and leopards. Public awareness about these species and then the benefits that people get out of the protected area network. So all those things are perhaps making this difference in the perception. People are getting more positive towards tigers and leopards compared to wolves. There could be many more such stats that I could put out, but then I have to finish this presentation within 10 minutes. Probably we'll discuss this more. So what it brings to us, there are challenges. Like for wolves, the major challenge is conflict and retaliatory killing for both the wolves, Himalayan or as well as Indian wolves. Another big challenge for wolves in, particularly in for Indian wolves, is habitat loss. Because the conservation policies are more focused on forested landscapes. So forested lands are converted into inviolate areas by making national parks, tiger reserves and all. While the wolves are mostly found in open savannas and grassland land areas. And there is no land conservation policy for those areas. Those are often marked as wastelands, open for agriculture conversion or for industrial purpose. So that is another challenge that Indian wolves are facing. And then a big problem in Indian conservation scenario is species target conservation plans. So we have conservation plans for tigers, we have plans for snow leopard, now elephants and rhino, but so far we don't have any such plans for wolves. And so perhaps we need to move a little more away from that and then start including these species by habitat conservation plans. So that would be a step further. That's all from my side. Thank you for listening.
Shivam, thank you so much. That was really splendid. And that's two of our very professional speakers who have kept to time perfectly. So we're off to a good start. Just while I'm looking in the chat, I see that people have already begun interacting amongst themselves, posing and answering questions. So please keep that going so we have a conversation on the side. But just as Mohammed's talk introduced some interesting vocabulary, what is vermin, what's a pest, what is treasured, so Shivam's talk, it seemed to me, introduced that we're dealing with a diversity of species. You showed several different big cats, even down to mentioning clouded leopards. I saw the photograph go on at the end. I was grateful for it. I like them. So anyway, but you were talking only about one canid. And I think it's interesting to consider one of the dimensions here is taxonomic diversity. And I think we might broaden the debate when we come to the wider discussion. If we considered, for example, dholes as well as wolves, would there be different perceptions? I don't know, Shivam, if you want very quickly to respond to that thought, but we can come back to it later as well.
Oh, yeah, sure. I included only wolves because the topic of this discussion is specific to wolves. Otherwise, the number and the stats on all those aspects look similar to canids. Whether you take a jackal or a hyena or dholes, the dholes compared to wolves enjoy much more protection because they are found in forest areas which are already under the tiger reserve areas. So except that, perhaps there is not much attention going to dholes, hyenas, wolves, or any other canids.
Very good. Well, thank you for broadening the debate there. And I think when we come back to the discussion, these different dimensions will all be worthy of a lot more conversation. Anyway, Barbara's brilliance has brought us to the next presentation. The slides are up already, and we're going now to hear from Mohammad Kabir from the Wildlife Ecology Lab in the University of Haripur in Pakistan. So, Mohammad, I hope you can hear me, and we can now hear you. Over to you.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, everyone. First of all, I am thankful to all organizers for providing opportunity to share about coexistence of wolves, snow leopards, and communities in northern Pakistan. So, grey wolf and snow leopard are categorized as top predators of Pakistan, and here you can see on map snow leopard geographic range is restricted to northern Pakistan, and as compared to grey wolf, snow leopard has a narrow geographic range in Pakistan. And when we talk about the population status of snow leopard in Pakistan, there is no reliable population estimation or assessment for the snow leopard and grey wolf in Pakistan, but the rough estimation shows that there are about 4 individuals of snow leopard reported from Pakistan, and about approximately 400 individuals of grey wolf are also recorded only from northern Pakistan. And grey wolf is listed as endangered in Pakistan, and on the other end, the snow leopard is categorized as critically endangered in Pakistan. But when we see these both on global status or IUCN status, snow leopard is categorized as vulnerable, and grey wolf is the least concerned species. So their status, first of all, their IUCN status also triggered that how much attention or conservation or research-based efforts they both are receiving in Pakistan and as well as across the globe. There are some research studies and conservation programs snow leopard in Pakistan, and on map you can see that the whole range of snow leopard is explored, and baseline information have been collected on occurrence and occurrence status, as well as the suitable habitat of snow leopard in Pakistan has been also assessed. And all these research-based conservation initiatives or conservation programs are effective and sustainable when we have enough scientific-based data collections and scientific-based information about species presence or occurrence. But when we compare it with grey wolf in Pakistan, and when we see a geographic range of grey wolf in Pakistan, it's a large range comparatively in comparison with snow leopard. But when we see the research studies are of efforts made to explore the geographic range of grey wolf in Pakistan, it's restricted to only northern Pakistan, or it's only fall in area which are habitat of snow leopard. And these area and these research were conducted all in line with snow leopard research project or conservation initiatives. Otherwise, all the range of grey wolf in Pakistan is unexplored, and there is no information available even on current status of grey wolf in Pakistan. Only the efforts were made to record the presence location of grey wolf in northern Pakistan, and habitat suitability modeling were performed to assess the suitable habitat and movement corridor of grey wolf in northern Pakistan. But the rest range of grey wolf in Pakistan is still unexplored. These are some presence locations of grey wolf obtained from northern Pakistan, and this study covered about 8 protected areas, and all these protected areas are particularly defined and particularly categorized to protect other wildlife species, but there is no particular attention for grey wolf in this area. And during camera trapping study, we observed that the area with maximum photo capture record of grey wolf are highlighted. The red dot shows the presence location of grey wolf, and wolf avoid to overlap habitat with snow leopard, and maximum photo capture were obtained from Josai National Park, Dogal National Park, and Hanbari study sites, but we did not get any presence location of snow leopard from this area. So it's clear that wolf avoid to overlap spatially as well as temporally with the snow leopard in this area, and the area with the maximum photo capture record of snow leopard, we did not get any capture or any photographic evidence of wolf from that locations or from that camera stations. A number of research studies have been conducted to enlist and to identify or to investigate human carnivore interaction in northern Pakistan, and here we only assessed and compiled the data on snow leopard and wolf interaction with the local community. And on the left-hand side, you can see a map with the intensity and the level of livestock depredation by both predator snow leopard and grey wolf. And at some of these sites, both are equally responsible for livestock losses to local community. But at few sites, snow leopard is responsible for more killing, but on the other sides, wolf is responsible for massive killing of livestock in area. As previous speaker mentioned, that wolf is responsible for a large number of livestock depredation in India. It's a similar pattern across its range in Pakistan. And but when we see that perceptions or attitudes of a local community towards protection or conservation of grey wolf in Pakistan, they possess more negative attitude towards the presence or conservation of grey wolf in Pakistan as compared to the snow leopard. So there are several reasons that why community have more negative perception towards wolf conservation or protection. It's almost similar as mentioned by previous speaker or across India or Pakistan geographic range, but there are some other factors are also here that I will discuss, and I will highlight to the audience and other conservationists. Previously, grey wolf was not included in the protected animals in Pakistan, and snow leopard was included in that list. But recently, government initiated to include grey wolf also in the protected animal list, and previously it was not protected. And whenever community have negative interaction with wolf and over livestock depredation, and they kill the predator, and they sometimes they do not get any penalty over wolf killing, or sometimes they consider that it's not a protected animals, and government officials also have least protection measures or interest against illegal hunting or illegal killings or illegal killing of grey wolf over livestock depredation in northern Pakistan. So there was a first reason why community have more negative attitudes and perception towards the wolf presence. And Here are some other reasons that I need to discuss with through this platform. Wolf, about 70% of wolf range in Pakistan is remained unexplored and are on least priority of researcher or conservationists, and only the studied or explored range of grey wolf fall in snow leopard range in Pakistan. And on the other hand, the community is getting benefit from snow leopard presence in that area, and there are many incentives for local community. There are many like a vaccination program, predator profiles, and several other incentives which are with the name and under the project of snow leopard conservation in the northern Pakistan. But when we see about the wolves and the community consider that they are not getting any kind of benefit or any kind of incentives with the name of wolves. And so the other reason is this: the local community is not getting any kind of benefits, and the community perceptions towards they are getting benefits. And on the other hand, community have positive and tolerance towards the losses when the large cat or big cat are involved in livestock depredation is that area. And the third one is, which is also different from other landscape or range of grey wolf across the globe. There is a least interest of conservation agencies, both national and international level. And whenever we talk about the conservation or protection of carnivore species in Pakistan, at national level, they prefer to support or they prefer to protect the species which are categorized as threatened under IUCN categories. And so there is also need to address the status and the population status or distribution status of carnivore species at country level, and which is highly ignored across the range of these top predator species. So here are some challenges to protect, and there are also some opportunities that can be utilized to protect the existing population of grey wolf in Pakistan. And the challenges are common across its range in India, Nepal, and Pakistan, like a natural prey and community perception and trophy hunting. In Pakistan, there are many game species, and trophy hunting practices have been launched for the protection and conservation purposes of carnivore species. But sometimes community perceive that increasing population of carnivore also have a negative impact on game species. And so there is also one reason that need to be realized and that need to be conveyed, and that also there is a need to educate the local community about the purpose of trophy hunting. And they should consider all predators or carnivore species equally important, and they should understand their role in our ecosystem. So it's lacking across northern areas of Pakistan. That's why people have negative perception towards increasing towards the population of predators from which they are not getting any kind of incentives or benefits. On the other end, increasing human population and livestock rearing and farming form an integral part of local livelihood in Pakistan. But on the other hand, there is a very poor practice of range land management in Pakistan, and overgrazing also have a competition with the carnivore, existing population of carnivore, and grazing competition with the natural prey of these carnivore species. And during snow leopard conservation programs, during snow leopard protection or awareness program, there is also need to educate the local community about the importance of wolves or about the role of wolf in our ecosystem. And there is need to educate community to make them realize about the importance of wolf in our ecosystem. And when the community have only a limited livelihood opportunities like livestock rearing or farming, then there is no other option for community, then definitely it will put a negative impact on existing population of carnivore species in northern Pakistan. So there is a need to diversify livelihood opportunities for local community to switch their livelihood practices or the sources of income to ecotourism and local products. So it will help to reduce the increasing number of livestock rearing or livestock population in the natural habitat of these carnivore species. There is need to, at the end I will discuss, there is need to study the genetic diversity of wolf population in Pakistan, as There is a unique landscape and there are several natural as well as artificial barriers which result in fragmentations of wolf population in Pakistan. And Pakistan is also an intersection between Iran and Himalaya wolf populations. And recent studies conducted by Lorian and his research team, they stated that the Indian wolf population is distinct from Himalayan Tibetan wolf population. And here you can see a map of Pakistan, and the range of Indian wolf is completely unexplored. There is no single study, have been conducted in this range. And so the lack of scientific information and the lack of ecological investigation is a main hurdle or drawback to develop species-specific conservation efforts or sustainable conservation plan for wolf in Pakistan. So these are the photographs available from Hindu Kush and Himalaya mountain range in Pakistan. Thank you.
Mohammad, thank you very much indeed. And if we stop sharing your screen, yes, that's perfect. Very, very good. So each speaker introduces a new set of considerations, but we've now heard enough talks to begin to see some commonalities between them. But for me, some of the new dimensions for the discussion that Mohammad brought to us included the fact that often we just don't know enough about where these animals even occur, what their distribution is. And so it's trying to debate what's happening with them is a bit like shadow boxing. We don't quite know what's going on, as well as the common theme about the importance of people's perceptions of whether they like them or not, and whether they have real complaints against them or imagined complaints against them. And Mohammad, also, I think you emphasized to us that these species, the wolf and the snow leopard in this case, are also in some sense part of the same guild, and we should be considering them together, and their interactions are part of the story. So I'm just checking now on the chat to see if there's any particular question for you as we move forwards, and not yet. So I think what we'll do is we'll maintain momentum, hold in mind all of these emerging thoughts for the general discussion, but turn now to the next speaker. If Barbara can get Geraldine's slides up on the screen. So Geraldine Werhahn from the WildCRU in Oxford is the next speaker. Geraldine, over to
you. So hello, everyone. I'm going to explore with you the causes and consequences for underrepresented wolf conservation in the Nepalese Himalayas, with the hope to find some positive way forward to change the situation. What I'm going to tell you about from Nepal is not so different than what we've heard from India and Pakistan, so there is a common pattern. Ooh. So somehow here we go. So to give you some background and where I had field exposure, so I've been doing field research expeditions across the Nepalese Himalayas. I've been to Humla, to Dolpa, to Kanchenjunga, also to the Qinghai Tibetan Plateau, Zhanjiang in China, just so you understand which ground realities I've seen. And in all of these places, we find Tibetan people from the Tibetan ethnic group. They all usually belong to the Buddhist religion. So the carnivores in this region, it's a very diverse carnivore guild. We have the red fox, Tibetan fox, snow leopards, the Himalayan Tibetan wolf, but also brown bear and lynx and Pallas cat. So it's a very rich community. Of course, most depredation conflict occurs with snow leopards and wolves. So that's where most of the debate is about. So let's dive a little bit into Nepal. Nepal is a very diverse country in many terms. It's rich in ethnic groups. The people belong to Hinduism, to Buddhism. There's hundreds of ethnic groups. The biodiversity is really rich, and this is a reflection of the altitudinal variation. So we have the tropical terai up across the Himalayan range to the alpine deserts of the Trans-Himalayan range. And of course, there's a lot of charismatic wildlife just characteristic to these areas. So let's reflect a little bit on the current situation of wolves and snow leopards in the country. So snow leopards get most attention by government organizations, NGOs, researchers, and funders. And there is a Nepalese national red listing. Wolves there are critically endangered and snow leopards are endangered. So this is already a good start. However, this is not reflected on the ground at all. There are conservation action plans and monitoring plans in place for the snow leopard, but not for wolves. We have a national depredation compensation legislation. And wolves, snow leopards, bear, and lynx, all these depredations, people would get compensation, but it's not implemented. And local people, especially in these remote mountain places, they're not aware that they are entitled to this compensation. And in addition to that, it's usually impossible to fulfill these compensation criteria. So in many places, these remote mountain villages, they would have to travel to a different district for many days. An officer would have to come and check on site, which is, again, many days of travel. So it's not realistic at all. And then also there is a bias in the conservation awareness. So local people in these remote places, they are aware that they should protect snow leopards usually, but they are not aware that wolves also merit protection, or the other carnivores. So this lacking awareness is also around the ecological significance of wolves and other carnivores, whereas snow leopards, they have a tendency that there's more awareness about the ecological importance of snow leopards, and they also get more respect from communities. So this is probably, snow leopards hold a higher cultural status compared to wolves in Hinduism and Buddhism. There's many stories. This is just the cultural foundation. For example, in Tibetan Buddhism, the snow leopard is the pet of the gods. So this is, of course, helping. And have been many studies that have found that snow leopards just receive a more positive attitude. And in many cases, they cause more conflict compared to wolves. Still, they get a more positive attitude. So it depends on which area we go to. Some places, snow leopards cause more conflict. So some places, wolves, as we have seen in previous studies, but this is not really influencing the attitude of people towards these carnivores. And illegal wildlife trade is posing a serious conservation threat to both of these species. Animal parts get traded across the border to China for medicinal and cultural purposes. This is a massive conservation concern. So let's explore a little bit about the causes of why we have this situation. Well, governmental and non-governmental organizations have various snow leopard projects, but none on wolves, basically, yeah. There's little funding opportunities for wolf studies in Nepal and elsewhere in the region. So we get a lot of interest from these young researchers. They want to study wolves, do something, but then there's no funding available for any wolf research. And these young researchers are forced to choose another subject, which of course is a shame. And there has been more than 30 years of single species conservation focus on snow leopard. So this has been wonderful work, and it's been a very successful and extremely valuable conservation story. We can learn a lot from that conservation work. But now afterwards, we're always smarter. Looking back, I just wish these conservation and projects would have emphasized, especially to local people, to also protect the other carnivores in the guild. I think we would see a different picture on the ground now. Also today, conservation organizations that work in specific areas of the Nepalese Himalaya, they usually only compensate for livestock that is depredated by snow leopard. Of course, this is again conveying to local communities that while snow leopards are important, wolves are not. And this is the wrong image, of course. The religious leaders, they are very influential in this region for conservation. They also have this bias. They are much more aware of the importance to protect snow leopards. They're not so aware of the importance to protect wolves, unfortunately. So the consequences of all of this, there's a lack of research and management interest for wolves among researchers and authorities. Wolves just don't bring any funding. Wolves and many other carnivores in the Himalaya and across the Tibetan plateau are neglected by conservation. And what we have found is depleted habitats, even in protected areas. So my team and I, we were really shocked to come in some of these habitats that are protected, where local people just don't kill snow leopards and their main prey, blue sheep, but they kill everything else. And they trade it to China or for livestock depredation. So these are empty habitats, and it's a shocking reality. But there's positive opportunities. I think this is a massive conservation opportunity moving forward. I think we can change this. Importantly, we have to raise the awareness of local communities. So conservation projects on the ground, they need to communicate to the local people the relevance of all the carnivores. In the top right, you see the cover of an educational book that my team and I created, especially to target this problem. In this book, we explain the importance of all the animals in the ecosystem, and it's targeted to these Tibetan mountain communities so they understand. So everything we do conservation on the ground, we always include the whole carnivore guild. So NGOs and government organizations, they should apply conservation strategies that include all carnivores. And often this is done with little additional cost. If we make all this effort to go and do this research in these remote places, while we are there, it doesn't cost us more to say, well, please protect the snow leopards and the wolves, but also the other species. So it's a very easy thing to do in many cases. And also, as the scientific and conservation community, we have to adjust our communication and also our priority setting. And of course, we have to raise the awareness of funders. While of course, it's wonderful that funders have their favorite species that they want to fund, I just want to emphasize, as a funding organization, I would be wary to just screen these proposals for more inclusive strategies on the ground, while of course focusing on this flagship species. The more funding we get for these small K-need studies, I think the more benefit we'll see moving forward. So with this, I think there's a massive opportunity to maximize our conservation impact by following a multi-species research and conservation strategy. So with this, I thank you all so much.
Geraldine, thank you. That was splendid, of course. And by the way, for anybody who has not yet seen that wonderful book that Geraldine showed that she and Naresh wrote, you must make it a priority to look at it because it's really great. So, Geraldine, if we stop sharing your screen and have a quick look and see how we're doing with the questions. Yeah, so we've got an interesting one from Shanmuga here. The discussions have to consider a few scientific facts, considering such things as flagship species, keystone species, umbrella species, all the familiar ones there, and also some niche partitioning. Are we talking about carnivores or herbivores or omnivores? So different dimensions to the discussion. We can come back to all of those things a little bit later, but Geraldine, it occurred to me that you brought up a couple of interesting points that add to the growing pattern from the other speakers. One of them was distance and practicality, that it's all very good and well in theory, coming up with a clever compensation scheme, but if it lives 5 days walk away, then it's not going to happen. And you also mentioned technical innovations as well, such as insurance schemes. I guess these things will surface in the general discussion. Very good. Okay, so keep on, people, please, putting your questions there. We haven't got many yet, but we'll have more soon. But now we're going to move on to the penultimate talk, if Barbara can magic up the slides, for Claudio Augugliaro from University of Lausanne in Switzerland. So Claudio, over to you. We can see your pictures, but can't yet hear your voice.
Okay, you can hear me now?
Yes, it's perfect.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So I will talk about hi everyone. I will talk about the co-occurrence between carnivore communities and pastoral activity in the Mongolian Altai. This is some contact in case someone wants to go in detail on the talk will do. I will first describe the results from interview-based survey in the Western Altai, and then result for camera trapping survey in the Western Altai. And later I will just discuss the potential solution for protecting wolf and the synergy with the conservation of snow leopard. And okay, so with the interview-based survey in the Western Altai, we aim to identify factors affecting livestock loss and those factors affecting the human attitude towards large carnivores occurring in the area, like snow leopard, wolverine, and wolf, because they are the most spread in the area. So we use an interview-based survey in doing 261 interview. You can see here in the red spot in the map, and in the map you can still see some polygon is green, which represent the protected area, and the other is outside protected area. To cover a total area of 40 square kilometer, and the questions refer to the year previous the interviews. Like for instance, we ask how many small sized livestock we lost in the last 12 months, like that. We use a general linear model to find the factors predicting livestock predation by large carnivore, and a cumulative linked model to find those factors mainly affecting human attitude towards carnivores, since we used a Likert scale and had managed ordinal data. So the first result to come out is for each livestock head lost by snow leopard predation, we lose 20 livestock head due to wolf. So already there is a really huge difference in that terms. And from the models come out that the small size of livestock losses was mainly due to this list of reasons, and mainly the more livestock, small size of livestock was owned by herder, and more increased the losses due by wolf predation. The same happened with the larger size of livestock, because likely the more livestock you own, more is difficult to guard it. And then also the number of movement of the herder's family in a year, since Mongolian are nomads, affect positively the predation of wolf, which means that there are more predation. And living in the protected area also determine more predation by wolf. Instead, the predation decrease with the larger number of dogs owned by herders. Then we also run a model to see the small size of livestock losses due to wolf at night, and we saw that it was significantly related to the use of coral across the year, because most don't use coral across the year, but those who use the coral even in summer, which is the season where it's less used, decrease actually the losses of livestock due by wolf. Then we had also about the human attitude toward wolf. As we can expect, it is the negative attitude is related to livestock losses due to wolf. And the summarized score of show how about the attitude of human toward the wolf show as it is very negative, the attitude toward wolf. Instead, toward the snow leopard, the attitude is quite positive, and neutral, slightly positive for wolverine. It is probably because the predation by wolf is much higher, and also probably because relatively several conservation actions are implemented in that area. So you can find detail of this work in this paper here. Instead, I would like to mention about the output from camera trapping in the Western Altai. We aim to evaluating the co-occurrence pattern of snow leopard, wolf, Siberian ibex, and livestock using camera trappings. We surveyed 4 sites using 48 to 63 cameras in each site, and a total sampling area was 3,183 square kilometers. So we use a multi-species co-occurrence model, and the main output was that while the leopard avoid the livestock, there is a negative co-occurrence. The wolf has a positive co-occurrence with the livestock. Furthermore, the wolf doesn't show a preference on any peak on the deal activity, and it was active throughout the day and night. Instead, the leopard is more crepuscular, but is most active in the night than during the daylight. So you can find also some the result in deep in this paper, Salvatore et al. 2021. So I would like to highlight the output that can make us think possible solution and synergy with the leopard conservation. Then we found that livestock losses due to wolf were 20 times higher than those due to snow leopard. The attitude of human toward wolves was very negative, in contrary was positive for snow leopard. The livestock losses by wolf increased inside the protected area. This is a point that for me is important. And then wolf had a positive co-occurrence with the livestock. And finally, the wolf were active throughout the day, showing a lower sensitivity on the disturbance compared with the snow leopard. So, in my opinion, the carnivore determining methods and long-term educational program can be the proper solution, because if we have, let's say, a traditional approach on conservation, like just protect the species itself, which will not work because the species is persecuted basically everywhere, or just increase the protected area, which, as we see, in the protected area, the people perceive the more predation than outside protected area. And then also for the Mongolian specific situation, for instance, the protected area is not effective on protecting wildlife, because especially wolf. We saw fur of wolf everywhere in the house of people living inside the protected area. And it is persecuted, is tolerated the hunting inside the protected area. So at the end, that's clear to me that's not a solution effective in Mongolia. But in the while, I have to talk and conclude my talk with this photo where we implemented, thanks to Snow Leopard Conservancy, a project in the Western Altai, which is the steady area I showed you, and Ovd, just slightly northeast, where the conflict with the snow leopard is instead quite exaggerated. And then we saw how in 1 year the predation decreased significantly, at least during the night. But the main thing is we are noticing that, well, the data still under analysis, but we are noticing from the interview that have the perception that the attitude is slightly improved. With the first time last month, a woman told me, okay, answering to my question, okay, we lost 10 sheep and got this year, but basically that's fine. That's the price we pay for nature, something that until the previous couple of years we implemented the project I never had. And so my perception is that if we are able to reduce the predation until a certain threshold that may be tolerated from the herders, that could be the proper solution to improve their attitude. And in this case, be overshadowed by snow leopard can be a benefit for the wolf, because at the end, this kind of project where the target species for, let's say, obvious, forgive me for that, but reason, like the flagship species that more fund is attracting more funding, more conservation effort, also for legislation. And so if wolf can benefit from that, like in this case where the target species was the snow leopard, but it seems is positively affecting the wolf, that can be the proper solution, of course, with the long-term educational program. So thank you.
Claudio, thank you very much. That was just perfect. One thing I'd like to ask you, you showed that lovely graphic that the damages caused by the wolf were 20 times more than the snow leopard. But on your graphic, the wolf had a little picture of some small stock and the snow leopard was killing a yak. In terms of numbers, that difference is great, but in terms of the value, can you say a little bit about the different damages?
We found actually in the picture that was assembled, so it was not specifically for the preference, but I can answer about preference. We did also that. You will find that all the data. We found that the preference of snow leopard was for yaks actually, and for the wolf was for horses. Then in the absolute number, of course they prey more small-sized livestock, both of them, but depending from the availability, we can say the preference for yak and horses respectively for snow leopard, the wolf was that one. So in that terms, I still can say that maybe if it's not 20 times more, the value of loss for the wolf is still maybe 10 times, 15 times. So actually the attitude for toward the wolf was very negative. Also, people that had losses from snow leopard was approximately 13%. Instead, people had the loss of a wolf was over 90%. So of course, is basically, as we found from the model, the livestock losses is probably the main reason. The problem there that is the local government, even central government, tolerate the hunting even inside protected area, even award the hunters that bring some food in some cases at the local level, at the local government. And then even when I talk with officers protected area, they do not consider the wolf a species. That's something different than all the rest. So I say in long terms, because that's need a really long time, we can also do educational program. But in a short time, probably in synergy with the conservation of the snow leopard, we can get immediately some benefit, because once they stop to lose livestock, or at least the loss can be tolerated until a certain threshold, I think somehow we can start talking, like is happening in the Western Altai with us.
Very, very good. And well, we must move on, but I see we're starting to get comments in the in the chat. More people joining us. And Claudio, your talk has stimulated some curiosity about guard dogs. And it'll be interesting when we go back to the general discussion to hear other speakers' experience with guard dogs too. But for now, we must keep moving. And so the final panel member to speak is next. And Barbara, perhaps you can get his slides up. He's Bejan Lorkipanidze, from Georgia, and from the Noah's Ark Center for the Recovery of Endangered Species, NACRES. Perfect. The pictures are there. Bejan, over to you.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to share our experience in the large carnivore conservation. And let me start with wolf conservation in Georgia, oops, some delays with, I cannot move slides.
Okay, we can see the title slide beautifully, but it's
not.
Barbara, could you do a magic spell?
I don't know why, but I just sharing screen, but yeah. Maybe
Bejan, would you click on the screen and then try to move the slides? Yeah, then.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you. So let me share our experience regarding the large carnivore conservation, mostly wolf, leopard, and lynx. And I start with the wolf conservation because that's how this species created and start, let's say, play the important role to establish my organization NACRES, which I am working with. And let me jump to the 1980s, when with the Soviet time and wolf conservation was not even considered by the government. They see wolf as a pest species. There was a bounty system, and they paid hunters to kill the wolf. They poisoned the wolf and well, try to exterminate from the protected, even within the protected areas. I mean, there is no limits on the wolf hunting, and of course that's affected on the wolf population. And in some areas, the wolf number declined, especially on the Lesser Caucasus part of the Georgia and in western part along the Black Sea coast. So there was a group of enthusiastic people who start work on the wolf conservation, or wolf ecology and ethology. They write the wolf pups in the captivity and have a study on the wolf behavior and try to oppose the idea that wolf is a pest species and underline the role in the species role in the ecosystem. And so after a while, we succeed to stop the bounty system, and wolf population start to grow. Of course, that's in 1991. After break of Soviet Union, that's also was a very harsh period for the Georgia. There was an economic crisis, and when we stopped the bounty system, there was no incentive for the hunter to kill the wolf in the country. And wolf population started recovery and recolonize the areas where it exterminated. And currently we have quite a wide distribution of the species, and it occurs almost everywhere except a very dense populated area. And we have quite a good number. Let's say the wolf is not under threat of extinction. It's very, very well doing. According to state count results, we have 1,500 individuals in the country. But we're opposing that assessment, and we think that there is no more than 500 individuals in the country. Actually, I should say that none of the carried out robust field scientific method. None of the organization carried out wolf population assessment in Georgia. All these figures are expert ideas. How many wolves do we have? And when we declared that we think that there is a 500 individuals, there was very strong opposition from the hunters, and they say, no, it's you deliberately underestimate the population because you want to get the funds for wolf conservation, but we have 2,000 wolf in the country, and they cause the problem. Of course, they cause the problem, and that's why we proceed with not wolf-oriented project, but a large project which focused on the human carnivore conflict. And that's how we started wolf telemetry in southeastern part of Georgia. And there is a sheep farming around the Vastovani National Park, and wolf depredate on a sheep very intensively. According to our data, we made a very intensive interview with the local farmers, and we monitored the loss from the wolf year by year. And average they have they are losing 14 sheep per year, per season. Well, of course, they are angry, and they see wolf as number one problem animals. So what we found, we try to compare this interview data to the telemetry data, and we found that in 2012 we have the two wolf pack home ranges here, and the losses of per farm was lower if the farm located close to the core zone of the wolf pack, and the loss in the peripheral zone of home ranges was higher. That was very interesting, let's say, finding of this telemetry study. But of course, it's we cannot prove anything because the data is so small. It's for only 1 year, and when we wanted to continue and test the hypothesis whether it's for the farmers is better to be close to the wolves, to the wolf pack core zone, then we failed to get additional funding to continue this work. Let me jump to the leopard conservation, and actually I should underline it's the Vashlovani National Park. There is this is a national park where we found the first leopard in Georgia, and this is the first ever leopard picture made in 2004, and this is a film cameras, and we, of course, that was a big story in Georgia because everybody liked this charismatic species, and we have not only the local media publicity, but also the international media interested in this unique, let's say, they call it the Caucasian leopard, but whatever. Even the single individual made the big story. And we monitored this individual for 5 years. And it disappeared in 2009, probably died, probably killed by the poachers, we don't know. But since then, we tried to find the leopard in the Georgia, and we spent quite effort and project to search leopard on the Greater Caucasus Mountains ridge. And finally, in 2021, we made the first picture of leopard in Tusheti National Park. This borders Dagestan, Russia. And the year later, we repictured it, the leopard. Actually, the time on a camera trap, it was there was some failure to put it in the right time on a picture. So, but yeah, we recaptured this individual, and we compared the photo to the Russian CITES data, where they also pictured the male leopard, and that was the same individual. It seems that the single individual male migrated from the southern part of the population, maybe from Armenia or from Iran, and tried to settle the home range here. But still very exciting news, and we still hope that we're gonna find the female leopard in the Caucasus Mountains, and there is that slightly chance that this majestic animal we're gonna recover slowly, but recover without reintroduction. This is the locations. This is the last leopard location, and this is the area we monitored 5 years, the single male, also migrant individual. Yes, yeah, and finally, let me speak about the lynx conservation. It was, I don't know why, but it was believed that lynx, we have very few lynx in Georgia, and it was included in the red list under the category critically endangered. Although we collected more data about the lynx presence in forested ecosystem, and It's widespread all over the Georgia where the forest ecosystem exists, and rhodie and hare population present. So we assess the population in the forested ecosystem here in the central part of Georgia. It is a Borjom-Kharagauli National Park. And we found that we have 1-2 individuals per 100 square kilometers. And also we assessed links in Vashlovani National Park, where we have a wolf telemetry, and once a leopard exists there. And their density is quite high. It's 3.5 individuals per 100 square kilometer, and this density is quite remarkable and comparable to the highest density in Turkey, which was detected. Yeah, well, I think the least studies. The lynx is one of the least studied carnivore in Georgia, and we thought that roe deer and the hare is a primary prey species. But recently, Eldar Cincharauli, the ranger of Shaukhestur National Park, is located on the Greater Caucasus Ridge, make a wonderful footage of lynx hunting on the bezoar goats. Let us see this remarkable footage, and I think the bezoar goats might be played an important role in lynx diet, and we don't know, and we still need much more study to confirm that. Yeah. Well, this is a final slide, and I would wanted to compare how many projects do we spend species specifically, and also the list. I made a list of projects which supported each species conservation. And you see that, of course, the wolf specific project was few, and nobody wanted to finance the wolf, let's say, the assessment or whatever, telemetry, etc. But the large project which focused on the particular conservation program, it is a human carnivore conflict or creating the enlargement of protected area, etc., etc. All these projects have specific conservation measures or research activities which benefit the wolf study or conservation, and vice versa. We have a every donor like to spend money on the leopard research, although we have only a few individuals in Georgia, but yeah, few large projects supported the leopard conservation. And of course, I think all the carnivores are under the shadow of the brown bear conservation, because we have 14 projects which is benefit the brown bear. So I think it will give you some light about the priorities of funding in at least in the Georgia. Thank you for your attention.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Bejan. Good. Well, another splendid talk that brings us to the end of the panelists' presentations. So in the chat, Bejan, I see that there's a specific question for you about the evidence regarding the Russian leopards that you had and where it came from and what were the dates. I don't know if you'd like to comment on that now or come back with the details later.
Well, we don't know where it came from. Well, at least we know that it is not released animal, and it's probably came from the southern populations. We have document. I mean, the Armenian colleagues and the colleagues from the Turkey documented quite a remarkable movement of young individual males from Armenia, probably through Georgia to Turkey. So it is the direct distance is 300 kilometers. So it might be also possible that one of the ways goes to the Greater Caucasus ridge from Armenia, and this male migrated from the south. But we are not sure. We're only sure that our picture and the picture in Russia is the same individual.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. And by the way, I should thank you for those exciting moments. The 2004 photo of the leopard makes the heart sing, and the video of the lynx hunting was thrilling. So now we're going to turn to the panel, and I think that Barbara is going to do something magical that involves all of the speakers, the panelists, putting on their microphones and also their cameras, and we can have a general discussion. So let me give a little warning to two of the panelists, the first and the last. In a few minutes, I'm going to turn first to Mohammad Farhadinia, and then to Bejan, who were the first and last speakers, to ask if they would like to offer a few reflections on what they've heard after and before their presentations. But just while they're preparing a few remarks about that, let me say that it seems to me that we've heard remarkable interest in the similarities between all of the different areas, but some very important differences as well. And I would suggest that what might be needed, considering both the biological aspects and the human aspects and almost the psychological and sociological aspects of this story, is a sort of audit of rationality, a real quantitative assessment of what are the costs and benefits and pros and cons, what are the real and the imagined problems, and how can they be integrated into one overall audit of what's going on. We seem so close, and yet in some ways so far from having the relevant detail. But anyway, maybe some sort of audit, some bank manager's analysis of where the costs and the benefits lie will emerge from our conversation. But first, just to get us going, Mohammad, having heard all the other speeches following your own, do you have any immediate reflections?
Yeah, I think each of them reflected the being overshadowed of the wolves in different ways. For example, in India, we saw that there's no place for the wolves in action plans or management. And then we saw in Pakistan that there are not really, there's no survey or research in anywhere as long as there's no snow leopards there. So basically, and the same with Nepal. So basically, they are like a bycatch for anyone else. And then we saw in Mongolia that because of the huge difference in the amount of damages caused by the snow leopards versus the wolves, which is by 1 to 20, the amount of hate and dislikeness is quite high. So in fact, we can see how the pattern is quite different, but I was quite shocked to see this difference between the amount of the damages caused by the wolves in the entire range. In 20 in Mongolia, 14 in Georgia, I guess 6 sheep per year was in Iran, and then I guess more or less the same number for other ranges of the other range countries. So it causes lots of difficulties, especially when we want to convince the governments, as you said, about how to finance these operations. But we need to find ways in order to prioritize at least the places that are much more important for the wolves.
Very good. That's a great perspective. And if I could then go back to Bejan, who was the final speaker, to see whether you have any reflections based on all the other speakers you heard first.
Well, it's very remarkable speaking, and what I found is that probably despite the figures that's wolf are killing much more livestock, but people, despite the threat comes from the leopard and the tiger, they still like the animal, and maybe that's something is worth to dig in the social psychology and think about why they prefer these cats rather than to wolf or some canines. I don't know, maybe that's a big eye makes them more attractive to the humans, or there is the fairy tales which are told by the locals by the mother to children, or some perceptions. Well, that's very, very interesting, and that's what I maybe I'm wrong, but I see the similarities all over the region. Everybody hates the wolf, but everybody likes cats. But I think in Shivan's data, correct me if I understood wrongly, that wolf hated despite the damage was less. By the cat, big cat's damage was higher, but still they hated wolf more. Is that
you're
right?
Absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean, in Georgia also nobody blamed the lynx, or we have a few leopards, but lynx it also depredates on the livestock, but still wolf is very, very hated animals among the local population. The locals who live close vicinity of the wildlife, the people from the large cities, they like the wolf and the lynx equally. I mean, because they don't have damage from the predators.
Yeah. So Bijan, thank you, and I think you are sensible to direct us towards the cultural and almost psychological aspects of these preferences. And in a moment, with that thought in mind, I'm going to turn to both Shivam and Mohammad Kabir from neighboring countries to see what messages they have learnt from the discussion. But just before I do so, thinking of Shivam's remark there about the hatred of the wolf, I was involved in a piece of work comparing people's liking or disliking for two big cats. So, rather similar animals in the Gir forest in India with Meena Ventakaraman, where it turned out that lions caused a lot of damage, but people still really liked them. Leopards caused much less damage, but people didn't like them at all. So it seems unfair. But in terms of Bijan, you're thinking about the type of face, the position of the eyes, and those sorts of things. That was if you like, a cultural difference just between two rather similar big cats. But so if I could ask Shivam first, any additional reflections from you, and then I'll turn to the other Mohammad Kabir.
Yeah, so this cultural aspect is really interesting to me, and I saw that link throughout all the presentations. If you just see the mythological stories about these wolves and snow leopards and tigers in Indian perspective from Buddhism and Hinduism, it's really strange that we hardly have any stories or any references to wolves, but we have a lot of references to snow leopard and tiger. There are gods who are like riding tigers, and those depictions are very prominent in our culture, but wolves are hardly there, and whatever mentions are there, they are mostly in negative terms. They're seen as bad omens, or that kind of depiction is there. That is one thing. And then the second thing is that this perception towards animals could also be changed at times that we have seen for tigers in some of the parts in India. So previously, tigers would have been like the most feared animals in those forest lands. But once those lands were converted into protected areas, and then more NGOs came in, the areas became tourist hubs. Slowly, this has started changing because people started gaining livelihood from tiger. So in those areas, perception for tigers have changed. The same thing we have seen in Ladakh. In last 20 years, the tourism has come in this area. So if you see the people who are older, they have more negative perception towards snow leopard compared to the people who are younger. So the younger people are more involved in tourism. They are more educated. So that is also kind of changing the perception.
We've got a freezing.
That kind of change can be brought to wolves also.
Very good, thank you. And then I'll turn to Mohammad, but let me just reassure the audience that I'm not ignoring the chat. There's some very interesting conversation going on, particularly about relationship between different carnivore species and wolves and dogs. But I think we can come back to those points. So Mohammad, do you have any reflections from what you've heard?
There are some factors that contribute towards the more acceptance towards the big cat as compared to wolves in Pakistan. Surely the cultural factor is much more important. Other than this, when our local community, we try to get information from local community about their perception, other than losses to livestock depredations, when we ask them about their perceptions or acceptance towards either big cats or grey wolves, and in these areas, local community considers big cats as a sign of bravery, and they have more acceptance towards the big cat as compared to the wolves, and even sometimes they call their young ones also with the it's like leopard, tiger, lion, and but when we discuss cultural aspects, they have little acceptance towards the wolf presence in that area. And the other factor is that in northern Pakistan, local communities are getting benefits or incentives in the form of a vaccination program, in the form of compensation scheme for the snow leopard, but at the same time, they are not getting any kind of benefits for wolf. So that's why they have more acceptance towards a big cat like snow leopard in that area as compared to the wolf.
Very, very interesting. And I think as we begin to consider more widely these cultural influences, of course, from different parts of the world, the cultural stories are rather different. You know, of course, Romulus and Remus are well-known wolves from the European tradition in terms of the foundation of Rome. In the UK fairy tales, the wolf has a terrible time with Little Red Riding Hood, and in a different colonial era, Mowgli and the wolves in Kipling's Jungle Book have a role. So I think there's a marvelous opportunity to look at the rich tapestry of stories around all of these species. But talking of that, Geraldine, can I come to you now, because I see you've engaged a little bit in the chat conversation about intra-guild interactions. I wonder if that's something you would like to comment on, or indeed anything else you've heard, because we are in the last 10 minutes of general discussion now.
Yes, I mean, so I think you have mentioned on this before that why we are here focusing on wolves. I think it's generally that we want to see more attention towards all of the canids, because I think this pattern is also affecting other canids. I mean, I can see it for the Tibetan fox, for example. Also red wolves, of course, they're very common here. It's a different story in the Himalayas. So, and the dhole, of course. So I think what I would like to see is exactly more of these researchers and conservation efforts that just focus on the whole carnivore guild, also paying special attention to canids, and really starting with this foundational work of slowly but steadily changing the mindset of these people in these really remote places that live with all of these carnivores. Of course, there's most often a lot of conflict with wolves and snow leopards, but we've seen that the amount of conflict is not really what's shaping this. So I think we have to put a lot of effort into changing these underlying value systems, and this is something we will work on for many decades. But I think it's important to crystallize this out and see what is really important. While it's important to decrease depredation conflict, there's many more also other important things to work on.
Very good. That's very helpful. I see that I'm going to come to a question I've just seen, but Geraldine, I wanted to push you a little bit on this transition of emphasis from single species, whether they be canids or felids or anything else, to guilds. We heard in some of the talks a little bit about psychology, the importance of human psychology. And I think psychologically, it's a rather different proposition to engage people's enthusiasm with the identity of a particular species rather than the functionality of an ecological guild. Can you give us any hints about how you think we could accomplish that jump in terms of getting people to buy in to a rather conceptual issue?
Yes, I mean, so I think if in a culture there's any story or some positive thing where we can start from, we can build on that, right? Unfortunately, in the case of wolves, it's usually more negative stories. So I think we have to try to get these negative stories out of people's minds. And I think somebody touched on this topic in the chat. It's about understanding. So what we see is, while there's not so many positive stories or something about wolves in the Buddhist culture, we can then just try to educate people about, as you said, it's not so much about the function in the ecosystem, but maybe make them understand that these wolves are very social and other canids as well, that, you know, that there's many similarities to maybe even a human family. So I think there's other ways to touch people's hearts. And I think this is really where it starts, where we have to start to change these local people's perception, and of course everyone's perception.
Very good. And that leads me, I see that James Goetz has put a question that any of the panel members might want to comment on. So prepare yourself to signal if you want to speak to this. So James says, he quotes, "We conserve only what we love only what we understand only what we are taught." So I wonder if this applies fully here, he says. What are the limits, caveats, and additions? Would anybody like to reflect on that line of thought?
Well, I think.
Yes. Go for it, Bejan. Yeah.
Well, it's very, very interesting statement. I think it's kind of can you repeat? Maybe I couldn't catch the important things.
Well, I think the idea, and everybody might just agree with it, that it's widely said that the motive for conservation is conserving things that we love, but we only love the things we understand or that we've already been taught about. So in this case, I suppose you paraphrase that and say, is the wolf's problem that nobody's taught us how to love it?
Well, yes and no. I think because well, the locals think that they understood their life well, and the wolf, they think that they understand the wolf from their perspective. They have a livestock and they receive damage from the wolves, and that's how they see wolf as an enemy, I guess. And to change that understanding, it's not because we are providing more information, but we should change their perspective and their perception. And I think that's very, very very difficult job. I mean, while paying a compensation, maybe that changed the attitude toward the snow leopard, but I'm not sure whether we will gonna pay the compensation of the wolf. That will be the same results. I don't know.
Very good, thank you. And then a different question that is preoccupying some people in the chat is rather interesting, because it's about interactions between wolves and domestic dogs. And I suppose when carnivore biologists are talking, they often talk about depredation, you know, the carnivore kills domestic stock. But this in the chat is really about interactions between wild wolves and domesticated dogs. Of course, there's an epidemiological aspect to that in terms of disease transmission and rabies. But I wonder, does anybody on the panel, anybody at all, want to make a comment about the dimension of human relationships with wolves, which is seen through the lens of, for example, aggression towards domestic dogs or disease transmission, rather than depredation on livestock?
Yeah, maybe I can have a comment.
Yes. Mohammed, yeah.
I think there is an it's not an emerging problem, it's already have emerged, and it's the free-ranging dogs in many Asian countries. The governments are not able to really tackle the problem because of the welfare issues and lack of the capacity. So what we can see now is the growing number of domestic dogs, free-ranging dogs, and at the same time wolves, which are just mating with each other. And then the government are not happy with the wolves as well. So in that way, that would undermine the wolves much more, because we would see plenty of hybrids just wandering around, just killing people's livestock, attacking people. And I think in the long run, if we don't do anything with the free-ranging dogs, what we can see is that a generation of wolf dog thing, which is just wandering around, and they're causing lots of problems. And in that way, the government probably start calling a calling program, which would eventually, affect the wolves as well, because there are nobody can really say if that's a hybrid or it's a pure wolf or dog. So in that way, that could be a real problem in future.
Well, very good. And then a last one before we turn to a bit of a summary. By the way, let me say to all the panelists, do please look later at the chat. Anna, for example, has been making some interesting comments, but I wanted to particularly highlight a remark by Robin Rigg and ask Geraldine if she would like to comment on it, because Geraldine, from an ecologist perspective, was advocating a shift towards thinking about functional guilds rather than one-off species. And I think Robin's point is there could be a little danger in there of a species being associated with a different species which has a bad reputation. So rather than everybody benefiting from the togetherness of a guild, there could be some negative read across. Geraldine, do you want to comment on Robin's thoughts?
Yes, I think it's an extremely valuable point by Robin Rigg, and I think, Mohammed has illustrated this problem as well. So don't get me wrong, I don't want to say every project should just look at the entire guild or focus at the entire guild, but I think the main point I would like to make is, while we are there as conservationists on the ground doing all these research and conservation activities, what we communicate to the locals really plays a big role. And these are not scientists, they're not reading our papers, but they are interested. They see scientists come to the field and they realize, okay, people are interested in snow leopards. And I think by me always coming to these places, they realized, oh, there's somebody also interested in wolves, and that made a big difference. And I would just want to emphasize it's our responsibility to just educate them in a holistic way. But I don't want to make the point that all the projects should just focus on all the carnivores, because I think there is this risk that then, they influence each other. Yeah.
Very good. Well, look, I think we've reached the point that we're all about to vaporize, or whatever happens to people when they spend too long on Zoom. So we're going to have to wrap up soon. And I've got about 5 minutes, mainly to thank everybody, particularly those who put energy into organizing this and who bravely contributed to the panel. I've also got a few notices I'd like to make for what might happen next. But before I get there, maybe I could offer you a slightly personal reflection, in fact, two personal reflections that build on some of the remarks people have made that are based not only on the science or the auditing of what damage is done, what conservation gain can be achieved, but the sort of cultural, psychological stuff. Two stories, one more general and one more specific. I was involved in a piece of work which sought to ask, I think it was 1,500 people from 6 different English-speaking countries around the world, which mammals they preferred for conservation. The thing that united all of these people was they owned a laptop, because they had to own a laptop to respond to the survey. So I suppose that means they were more or less middle class and had enough money to buy a laptop. But anyway, the fact is that out of the 100 mammal species that they could rank as their priorities for conservation, the international sample, which came from India, Australia, South Africa, Britain, and the USA, put big cats as 6 of their top 10 and no canid anywhere near the first half. So that group of people, even though we discovered that they were almost all dog owners and dog lovers, many more of them had a pet dog than had a pet cat, for their conservation preferences, really liked something about cats. And so we redid that survey, just looking at canids versus felids, with a very, very similar result, that people, the sort of people who might, for example, give money for conservation, were much more interested and appealed much more to the attributes of cats, especially big ones, rather than canids. So I think that's something we've really got to think about. What's the basis of that? And so I get to my anecdote, as I have a minute left for the anecdote. In my own experience, I started my career working on red foxes, which those of you who have seen one will know is the most beautiful carnivore that there is. And I worked in a sheep farming area where, although the foxes were beautiful, the shepherds absolutely hated them. And actually, much of the culture of those shepherds was based on the quality of each man's dog and its capacity to kill foxes and how many foxes they killed. So their hatred of foxes was a part of their daily lives. And I spent a lot of time trying to understand, sitting drinking beer with these people, why they hated the foxes so much. And they loved dogs so much, after all, they're close relatives. And I came up with a hypothesis I just put to you now. It's a sloppy one, but that one of the things is that these shepherds really, really were driven crazy by the fact that they could control their dogs, and yet the foxes were better than dogs. They were smarter, quicker, faster, and the shepherds just could not control them. It drove them mad. And I think that that's sort of the explanation may be wrong, but that sort of human psychology is the type of thing we should be thinking a bit about in this wider debate, because while there's a lot of biology, a lot of science, a lot of sociology that I think we could usefully do, I think a lot of the discussion today has been about human psychology, and
exactly, yeah,
we need to understand more. So I would close my little reflections by saying that I do think this topic is ripe, is ready for what I called a rationality audit. If we looked at each part of the story, the biology, the human dimension, the economics, the psychology, and said, what is rational, what is irrational, and what are the numbers involved? This is very crazy, this is a little bit crazy, for example, that we might be able to tease apart some of the puzzles that are going on here. But I think what we'll be left with is puzzles about human psychology. Anyway, let me say 3 things. One of them is to remind you that this has all been recorded. And Barbara, who we must thank again, because we got through all those presentations without serious hiccup, all thanks to Barbara, so thanks to her. And tonight, or sometime soon, she will have put the whole thing on the WildCRU YouTube channel. And I think that somewhere in the chat, Mohammed or somebody will have put instructions as to how to find that. And then there's two questions that you might like to think about. And Mohammed is also going to put instructions up about how to find a Google document where you could respond. And we're hoping that your opinions will help the participants think further about these problems. So the two questions are, and you'll see they're designed only to prompt you to say something. The first is, in your opinion, what are the three most important points made in today's discussion regarding conservation priorities for canids and felids? So, what did you take from this as worthwhile points? And then the second question would be, in your opinion, what are the three most important knowledge gaps, or indeed actions, that would, if the gaps were filled or the actions undertaken, address the inequality in conservation effort between canids and felids? So these are just provocations to you to say what you think is important in this, which can influence the thinking of the panel and others going forward. And as I say, there's a Google document that Mohammed's going to give you a little tutorial in the chat about how it works. And hopefully all those things may one day converge into some sort of output which may be published somewhere, or at least a better understanding of what's going on. So we arrive spot on time at the end. I just want to thank all the speakers for being both so professional in their presentations, but also so fascinating in what they had to say. Thank the audience for making such interesting comments. Those comments have a life after the next few moments. You can read about them and think about them and correspond indeed with the people in the audience who've offered a comment. But for now, I think it just remains for me to thank you all. And if this were the real world, we would all be applauding riotously at the moment. So I will do some sort of figurative applause. Thank you all very much indeed. Bye for now.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you all so much.
It was very interesting. Thank you.
Great. Very good.
Thank you.